Hello guys, and the Russian stock market experiences the steepest single-day decline in 3 years. We may say since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, better described as the failed blitzkrieg. Moscow Exchange Index that tracks 40 most important big companies reported the collapse of 4% in various fiats, and the companies that suffered most are GAZPROM, ROSNEFT, SBERBANK, AEROFLOT, and I'm sure you can guess what stands behind these tremendous problems for once very successful Russian companies. Once again, the failed blitzkrieg and the Ukrainian drone sanctions. The Kremlin is trying to find a way how to cover this huge hole in the military budget that is already visible on the shelves of the Russian supermarkets, where they keep introducing ratios and imposing restricted prices, but that won't save a situation. Now they discuss rising prices, not just for the wealthy, but also a traditional VAT from 20% to 22%. And that in the context when the majority of Russians report losing their income, extreme worries about their deposits in the bank, with serious waves of withdrawals from the Russian banks, whenever Putin speaks more about the need to defend Russia, which traditionally means the need to attack other countries while totally unable to defend strategic for the Russian economy objects. So let's discuss what is happening right now on the Moscow stock market. How is it connected with the frozen negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? And when will we finally witness the collapse of the Kremlin regime? My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see the defeat of the Russian Federation, subscribe. It has already started, and here we discuss everything in detail. Please share these videos to spread the truth. You know that Russian economy is in great trouble. They report constantly growing inflation, and even professionals like ministers of finance or head of the central bank speak about the technical stagnation. Right now, officially inside Russia, the inflation is 11.96%, but everybody understands in reality it is way bigger and it is totally artificially restricted, but the tools are already finishing. And the stock market is a very clear demonstration how wrong things are for the Russian budget. Once again, today, the Russian stock market experienced the steepest decline in a single day in the last 3 years. Moscow Exchange Index tracks important Russian companies, approximately 40 of them, and they had to report this decline among the income of the companies, and it actually fell 4%. On average, with some companies suffering even more. And it was very important to see that among those companies experiences the greatest losses, we see GAZPROM and ROSNEFT. I'm sure it's not difficult to, draw logical conclusions what stands behind that. The Ukrainian drone sanctions. And what was the reason for the Ukrainian drone sanctions? The fact that Putin underestimated Ukraine and that Russia has totally wrong imagination, not just about Ukraine, but about their own state, about their own army, and about the world in general. Among the other companies that suffer from this tremendous decline, we may see SBERBANK and Russian banking system is collapsing, all because people understand their money, their deposits can disappear anytime and they keep withdrawing them, thus fueling the already created vacuum of income for the Russian banks. Also, among these companies that are losing a lot, many come from the real estate area. People stopped buying houses, and once again, we are not bombing the civilian infrastructure as they do in Ukraine. We only demilitarize arsenals, drone building facilities, or oil refineries. But even in such conditions, people stopped buying flats inside Russia. And one of such giants actually decided to decline dividend policy, which is a proof of their approaching bankruptcy. Subscribe and share the information, because many, even good people, still believe in this Moscow-centric paradigm of the world, and it's very wrong, especially when the Russian Federation is obviously collapsing because of the economic mismanagement traditional for the collapsing projects on that territory, just like it happened with the USSR. So this tremendous and very quick collapse of the stock markets is not something that happened just today. What we observe today is this steepest single day decline, but in general, the Russian stock market was falling and falling and falling during the last 5 weeks without any pauses, and that is a sign of huge problems inside the budget, inside the Russian economy, that they were trying to hide. But there is always a moment in these economic problems that you can now more mask them, you cannot hide them, you cannot pretend it's a monthly, weekly problem when it lasts so long. And in general, the inflation is pretty big, even from this, official statistics. But if we count the money that Russia lost during this recent decline of the stock market, it is more than $15.9 billion. With already huge hole in the Russian budget, it is very destructive. Once again, in many more or less honest, more or less democratic countries, such situation would already be discussed all over TV, all over internet. In Russia, they keep hiding, but more and more of the Russian oligarchs are trying to take away their money and also thus ruining the stock market with their actions. And people, ordinary Russians, stop trusting the banking system. So it's like, I don't know what's the English for that, a circle. You're walking and running in that circle that gives you more and more problems, because people's panics, their withdrawals from banks lead to more problems inside banks, and this leads to more economic problems. And that in context of constant attacks on the Russian oil refineries and military plants and factories. I won't concentrate our attention on that today, but another important facility was demilitarized in Novosibirsk. That was electronics and microchips plant, and these things are used in drone warfare. So it's interesting to observe how, with this growing war inside the Russian Federation, with the lost control in the Kremlin, with no borders, Russia is no-fly zone, close to a half of their oil refineries destroyed, 40% of oil refining capacity is lost, huge shortages of gasoline in dozens of the Russian regions. They keep speaking about the military budget when they literally do not have a budget for education and medical care. This project of Putin, the recreation of the USSR, is collapsing together with the Russian Federation and the Kremlin regime. And to see that panic, to understand how Russian military experts and vloggers think about the situation, check my new video on Anna Danilchuk channel, where I report about this inside dissatisfaction that becomes more and more visible, not just in comments, but in official addresses of people that once cheered for the so-called special military operation that turned into the, quick dissolution of Putin's project. Follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, and Discord for more everyday life updates. Check our merch shop for lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. But most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!